Who is she? That was the first thing my cousin whispered the moment I stepped into the room. No hello. No hug. Just a confused look, like I was a stranger crashing a private event. But the truth is, I built everything they were here to inherit. The logo on the front gate. I designed it. The recipes on the menu. Mine. The name of the business. A joke I once made that stuck. And yet, there I was. Uninvited. Unwanted. Unmentioned in the will. Or so they thought. Because just as the lawyer was about to read the final line, a man I had never seen before raised his hand, stood up, and asked. Before we go on, shouldn't Anna know what her father and I signed together? In that moment, the room turned cold. Faces went blank. And my life changed forever. What happened next unearthed secrets my family thought they had buried with my father. So stay with me until the end. This is the story of how I was erased, forgotten. And how I came back to reclaim what was mine. The room was cold. Not because of the air conditioning. But because of the sharp stares, long silences. And forced smiles hiding quiet disdain. The leather chairs creaked under the weight of expectation. My father's portrait still hung on the wall. Smiling next to my brother Thomas. Taken the day they opened the family restaurant's third location. I wasn't in the photo. As if I never existed. I sat in the last chair, back row. Trying to look invisible. Not out of fear. But because I had grown used to being overlooked. Especially by Thomas. He gave me that same look our father used to give him. The one that said, "You don't belong here anymore." But something felt off. He seemed nervous. His hands trembled slightly as he held his glass of water. The same glass we used in board meetings back when I was still on the executive team. Before everything collapsed. The last time I saw my father was 3 years before he died. He called me ungrateful. A rebel. A disgrace. All because I dared to leave the company. I submitted my resignation formally. Told him I wanted to start my own business. A small bookstore in another town. He laughed. Laughed like I had just told the saddest joke of his life. "You won't last 6 months." He said, without even lifting his eyes from the profit report. As I walked out carrying my last box of papers. It felt like tearing a piece of myself away. But I still left. And now, here I was. In that same room. Surrounded by cousins who barely knew my name. And a brother who'd rather see me dead than own a piece of the family empire. I was about to hear, officially, what everyone in that room already believed. That I had been erased. But what they didn't know was that fate had tucked away one detail. Not even my father could control. And that detail was about to stand up. My name is Anna Collins. I'm 52 years old. And for 28 of those years, I was my father's right hand. While my brother studied business in Europe, I was cleaning the floors of our very first restaurant. Taking orders by hand. Washing dishes after hours. And perfecting the sauces that now carry our family name. No weekends. No holidays. I'd wake before the sun and go to sleep long after the last staff member left. And I never once complained. The problem didn't begin with the work. It began the moment I asked to be seen. It was the year we started expanding. My father wanted to open 2 new locations and needed someone trustworthy to manage the finances. I was right there. Experienced. Reliable. Ready. But who did he name as the director? Thomas. My younger brother. The same Thomas who, in my father's own words, still couldn't make a decent cup of coffee. He needs to learn, my father said. And the best way to learn is by leading. And me? I was handed the title of purchasing manager. It sounded important. But I was still the one counting onions in the stockroom. And scrubbing my own aprons. I tried to swallow the disappointment. Told myself, if I keep showing up, if I stay loyal, one day he'll see me. But no. Time only brought more disregard. He started ignoring me during meetings. Said my ideas were too emotional. Once, in front of investors. He called me the soul of the business, but not the brain. People laughed. I smiled politely. But inside, I bled. My mother was the only one who ever truly saw me. She used to say, "Anna, your father's blind when it comes to hierarchy. In his mind, only men can lead." When she passed, it felt like I lost my last shield. The following year, the annual bonus I'd received for over a decade vanished. They said it was a bookkeeping error. The year after that, my name was left out of the credits on a major ad campaign. Even though I wrote the entire script. Then came the invitation to the company's 50th anniversary event. They spelled my name wrong. Left out my job title. Anna Collins, staff member. That's when I knew. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. They wanted me to know. That to them, I had never really belonged. The next day, I wrote my resignation letter. Left it on my father's desk. And walked out without looking back. There were no phone calls. No goodbyes. I opened my bookstore anyway. With a small personal loan and a heart full of fear. For months, I sold maybe 2 or 3 books a day. But every customer who walked in was a reminder that I could finally breathe. For the first time in my life, I felt free. And then, 3 years later, my father died. No phone call. No apology. Not even a whisper of my name. Or so I thought. Until the day of the will reading.
The lawyer cleared his throat and opened the leather folder with a solemn air. As if he were holding everyone's fate inside. And in a way, he was. My heart pounded. But not with hope. It felt more like a door about to slam shut forever. Thomas sat in the front row. Broad shoulders, tailored suit, wearing the expression of someone who already knew he'd won. Next to him, his wife flipped through a home decor magazine, as if she were already planning the redesign of the house I grew up in. "Let's not drag this out," Thomas said to the lawyer. "My father was a straight shooter. We don't need a dramatic build-up." Connor, the family's lawyer for decades, nodded calmly. He began with the usual formalities. Full name, date of death, legal clauses. Then came the distributions. "To my son, Thomas Collins. I leave Collins and Sons, along with all associated assets and holdings." Thomas didn't smile, but his eyes gleamed. "To my daughter-in-law Elizabeth. I leave the summer home on Shelter Island, and the 1969 classic car." Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. Even she seemed surprised. "To my grandchildren, a joint college trust. Managed by Thomas." At that point, the room buzzed with restrained excitement. Soft chuckles. Hand squeezes. Silent celebrations. I sat perfectly still. Connor turned the page with a crisp flick. "And to my daughter, Anna Collins." I stopped breathing. For a second, the world stood still. Who chose a path outside the interests of this family, I leave only the record of that choice. And for that reason, I bequeath her nothing. Silence. It was like the floor vanished beneath me. The words echoed in my head. "Your choice. Nothing. Record. No keepsake. No token. Not even a letter. Just erasure. Formalized. Signed. Stamped." My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. not in front of them. Thomas crossed his arms, content. Elizabeth masked a smile, and a few cousins, who probably didn't even remember my name, looked at me like I was an extra in the wrong scene. But then, something strange happened. From the back of the room, a man stood up. He wasn't family. Not an employee, not a friend. At least not one I'd ever met. He wore an old but clean suit. His gray hair was neatly combed, and in his hand, he held a small leather folder. Different from the lawyer's. Everyone stared, puzzled. Connor furrowed his brow. The man cleared his throat politely. "Forgive the interruption. My name is Samuel Bright. And before this reading is concluded, I believe Miss Anna Collins has the right to be informed of a document signed between her father and me, about 4 years ago." Thomas scoffed. "What is this? This isn't a courtroom. You can't just interrupt like that." But Samuel stood firm. "I understand your frustration. But this document directly involves Miss Anna, and Mr. Charles Collins instructed me to disclose it only if she was present for the will reading. Which frankly, none of you expected." The air turned razor sharp. Connor, visibly tense, reached out his hand. "May I see the document, Mr. Bright?" Samuel opened the folder, and handed over a yellowed piece of paper with 2 signatures at the bottom. Connor studied it carefully. Then, his eyes widened. He slowly placed the document on the table, and looked straight at me. "Miss Collins. This changes everything."
This changes everything. The lawyer's words were still hanging in the air when the room erupted. "This is outrageous!" Thomas shouted, jumping to his feet so fast that his chair toppled behind him. "This woman abandoned the family. She turned her back on my father. And now she shows up acting like some long-lost heiress." Elizabeth tugged gently on his sleeve, trying to calm him. But the mask had already cracked. His anger had roots. Old ones. Deeper than my absence. Connor remained composed. "The document is legitimate," he said. "And as per Mr. Charles Collins' request, this clause was to be kept outside the official will. For security reasons, and for the element of surprise." All eyes turned to Mr. Bright. The stranger who now seemed to know more about my life than I did. "4 years ago, your father reached out to me," he explained calmly. "I'm a retired attorney, also a former business partner of his. Charles wanted to create something that couldn't be reversed. Even through legal challenges." He looked directly at me. "He said he needed to make sure that if he ever regretted pushing you away, you would still receive a part of what you helped build." Connor flipped the page toward me. "It's all here, Anna. Your father created a private trust in your name. It includes shares in one of the group's companies. Held in secret, so no one could pressure you into giving them up." My eyes scanned the shaky handwriting. There it was, written in blue ink. "If Anna is present at the time of the official will reading, and if this document is not acknowledged by me in the formal testament, she shall be granted full ownership of the listed property. And the entirety of the Collins Bright Trust, created solely for her. Signed, Charles E. Collins." A breath escaped from my chest. Not because it changed my financial reality, but because, in some quiet, hidden way, he had remembered me. He wanted to make it right. Even if it was too late. Even if he did it behind closed doors. Thomas stormed across the room. "This is a scam. You were just a whim of our father's. You never had the mind for business. And now you're back pretending to matter." I stood up slowly. My hands trembled. But my voice didn't. "I'm not here to pretend. I'm not here to take your place. I'm here to claim what's mine. What I built with my own hands. What you tried to erase. But the truth refused to let die. Eyes around the room shifted. Some family members, so proud just minutes ago, now looked away. Maybe in shame. Maybe in fear. That I had become something they could no longer control. Connor held out a new envelope. This is the deed to a property in rural Vermont. Your father bought it, restored it, and put it in your name. He said it was meant to be a fresh start. A house. A trust. And above all, a recognition. But my mind was a storm. After years of being invisible. How was I supposed to trust this? I had dreamed of apologies. Longed for him to see me. And now I had it all. But I wasn't sure if I still wanted it. Samuel Bright handed me a small handwritten note. Tucked inside the document. Just a few lines. Anna. If you're reading this, it means you were brave enough to show up. I'm sorry. Choosing you was never the mistake. Pretending you weren't a part of me, was. Dad. My hands trembled. My legs nearly gave out. But in that moment, amid quiet tears and stunned silence, I knew. This was my second chance. And for the first time in my life. I didn't ask for anyone's permission to take it. The road was narrow, lined with towering trees that arched overhead like a natural tunnel. Sunlight filtered through the branches, casting golden patterns across the dashboard of my rented car. On the passenger seat sat the envelope containing the deed. Resting atop my purse like an invitation to a life I wasn't sure I deserved. Vermont. A quiet town with just over 3,000 residents. Famous for its sourdough bakery. And a bookstore that had closed the very same month mine finally broke even. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of trying to prove I could survive outside my father's shadow. He'd left behind a legacy in a place where no one even knew the name Collins. The house was simple. But beautiful. Dark roof. Wide windows. A porch with 2 wooden chairs. At the gate, a small iron plaque, weathered by time, bore a single word. New beginning. My heart skipped. When I opened the door. The scent of new wood mixed with something familiar. Fresh coffee, maybe lavender soap. In the living room, a stone fireplace. In the kitchen, a handwritten note from Samuel. She's ready. Now she just needs someone who knows how to make a house feel like home. SB. I spent the first few days arranging furniture. And trying to quiet my thoughts. The neighbors were kind but reserved. No one asked where I came from. No one seemed to care who I used to be. And oddly enough, that was both a relief and an ache. I was just Anna. No titles. No legacy. No family drama. But the silence, especially at night, was heavy. I'd sit on the porch with a cup of tea. Staring into the stillness, asking myself. Now what? One afternoon, as I unpacked a box of books from my old store, I found something I hadn't seen in years. My very first notebook, filled with story ideas. One entry made me laugh out loud. It was about a woman who runs away to the countryside. And opens a bookstore inside her home. I closed my eyes. What if? The next morning, I drove to the old bookstore in town. Its windows were dusty. The sign was faded. Across the street, an older man sat on a bench, watching me. You thinking of opening it again, he asked, or just flirting with the idea? I'm still deciding if I'm brave enough, I replied. He smiled. If you made it all the way here. You already are. 2 weeks later. I used a portion of the trust to rent the space. A neighbor who was a local artist helped me repaint the walls. I arranged the books by genre. Created a cozy reading nook with armchairs, warm lighting, and herbal tea. I named it. Between the Lines. The first month, 7 people walked in. The second, 32. By the third, a teacher from the local school asked if I'd do story time for the children. Without even realizing it, I had found my way back to what I loved most. Connecting people to stories. But not everything was peaceful. One afternoon, I received a letter from Thomas. It was cold. Blunt. Hope you're enjoying your little show. Dad never knew how to handle disappointment. I threw it into the fireplace. That same week, I found a small note left anonymously in the shop. Your store saved me from a hard day. Thank you for creating this space. I cried. Not because someone thanked me, but because, finally, someone saw me. And in the quiet process of rebuilding, I met Nathan. A literature professor. A widower. Kind. His eyes were tired, but his smile said, I understand. He came in every Friday. At first, just to browse. Then, he started leaving notes inside books. One day, he handed me a copy of Women Who Run with the Wolves. With a page marked in the chapter titled, The Return of the Wild Woman. Tucked inside was a note. There is nothing more powerful than a woman who rebuilt herself from her own broken pieces. My heart, once hardened by neglect and silence, softened. Not as someone who forgets, but as someone who chooses to move forward. It was on a rainy afternoon. The kind where no one steps outside unless absolutely necessary. When the bookstore's bell rang 3 times in a row. I had been arranging the new display for our local book club. When I glanced out the window, my body froze. Thomas. Soaked from the rain. His hair disheveled. His leather folder dripping with water. Yet he still carried that same old arrogance. I hesitated to open the door. When I did, I left it halfway open. It's a bookstore, I said. Everyone's welcome. He stepped in slowly. Like he was walking on broken glass. He looked around. Maybe surprised. Maybe not expecting I'd actually built something for myself. It's nice, he muttered. It's mine, I replied. The words came out firm. More like a warning than a statement. He nodded. Then placed the wet folder on the counter. I came about the company's inventory. Some shares, due to the agreement with Mr. Bright, are still technically in your name. I raised an eyebrow. And you think I moved all the way to Vermont without knowing that? Of course not. He sighed. Worn out. But that's not the only reason I came. The silence between us thickened. You want some coffee? I offered. He hesitated. Do you have sugar? I smiled. There always was. We sat across from each other. 2 steaming mugs between us. I waited. Elizabeth left me, he said flatly. Said she's tired of living with someone who's full of bitterness and pride. I took a sip of my coffee. Must be hard to live with someone like that. He didn't argue. Just stared at his hands. As if they were too heavy to hold. Anna. I know I was wrong. I know I was unfair. But everything I did was because I wanted our father to see me. To recognize me. He looked up, eyes wet. I was the favorite, but somehow. He admired you more. And that destroyed me. He never said that to me, I whispered. He didn't need to, Thomas replied. He showed it in other ways. He watched you. Pushed you. Tested you. Like he needed proof that you were stronger than all of us. And I was, I said softly. He nodded, quietly. You were. And I only saw it when everything around me collapsed. There was a long pause. Then he pulled another envelope from the folder. These shares. If you sign here, you give them up. You keep the house, the trust, what's already yours. And we never have to see each other again. I stared at the paper for what felt like forever. It wasn't about the money. It was about closing a chapter. On my terms. And if I don't sign, then we'll have to talk. Consult you. Respect you. And, eventually, listen to you. His answer surprised me more than the inheritance ever had. For the first time, Thomas acknowledged my worth. I didn't come here for revenge, Thomas. I came here to live. I closed the envelope and pushed it back to him. But if you ever want to talk as my brother, not as some company rep. The door's open. He nodded. Eyes red. Hands trembling. He stood up. And just before leaving, he looked at me with a face I'd never seen before. One that had finally heard me. You became everything I always wanted to be, he said. I didn't answer. But when the door closed behind him, I knew the cycle had ended. Not with bitterness, but with freedom. Autumn arrived gently, painting the trees in shades of gold and burnt orange. Leaves danced around the entrance of the bookstore, falling like quiet reminders that everything has its time. That even what once felt dead can bloom again. Between the Lines had become a gathering place. Some people didn't even come for books. Just for tea. For conversation. For a breath of peace. And I loved that. To see faces soften when they walked through the door. To feel that this space, just like me, had become a refuge. Nathan now came on Saturdays too, not just Fridays. He said he was writing a book. That the bookstore helped him remember why telling stories still mattered. Sometimes, he'd sit and just watch me. With a half smile. The kind that says, I see you. One morning, I found a folded page tucked inside a copy of Clarice Lispector. In Nathan's handwriting, it read, Life begins the moment you stop waiting for approval. And start approving yourself. I tucked that note into my idea journal. The one I now use to plan the bookstore's next phase. A writing club for women over 40. Yes. I was going to help other women tell their stories too. The ones who stayed silent for too long. The ones who'd been labeled too much, too difficult, or too lost. Because I had been all of them. And I survived. Now, on windy days, when the windows rattle and the sky grows heavy, I stop what I'm doing. Pour a cup of tea. And sit on the porch. I look at the plaque on the fence. New beginning. And I smile. Because I know it's not just the name of the house anymore. It's the name of the woman who lives inside it. And when I think of my father, of the wounds, the silence, the injustice, I no longer feel pain. I feel understanding. He was limited. But in the end, he tried to see me. And me. I saw myself. I rebuilt myself. I chose myself. And there's no greater inheritance than that. If this story touched you, if you've ever felt like Anna, unseen, unappreciated, forgotten, just know, you are not alone. Life may dim your light for a while. But there's always a chance to shine again. It's never too late to start over. Freedom is worth more than any sacrifice. And your story matters. Even if no one has told you that yet. If this journey moved you, please leave a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, which part of Anna's story spoke to your heart the most? Until next time. Stay strong. Stay kind. And never forget, your voice matters.